Okay, so we're waiting for season 3, and they're telling us that it's time for Colin and Penelope, and I can't wait for this couple. I've been waiting for them for a while, so I figured why not just be weird and do an unnecessary, unabridged breakdown of every single scene that they're in, because I think he kind of likes her. So here goes. Season 1, Episode 1. There's a whole bevy of men courting Marina, and Colin is in the room, and he throws a quick glance at someone, but I don't think he's glancing at the guy reciting poetry. It looks like he's glancing further out in Penelope's direction. He then takes the time to come up to Penelope, and he makes a quip about the guy's poetry. He doesn't choose anyone else, and notably, his sister is sitting right there, but he goes straight for Penelope, making it clear that he knows her well, and he likes to talk to her. In the final scene of episode 1, we see Colin and Penelope at a ball. So at the ball, Colin comes up to Penelope to ask about Marina. And I like how he already has a smile on his face when he talks to her. Then hero complex Colin asks Penelope to dance after Cressida snubs him. But I really don't think that he was being just a hero there. He is smiling as they hit the floor. And when the music stops, he's still looking at her and he's holding her hand. Episode 4, Colin comes up to Penelope at the Trowbridge ball to make a joke. I like how he feels comfortable joking with her, and I think he knows that she appreciates it. And Penelope quips back about how the heir of the Trowbridge family resembles the footman, and Colin also appreciates this joke. And then he locks eyes with her, and we get what I consider the longest pause in history, and he's not breaking her gaze. I clocked it. It's just 5 seconds of him staring at her. It's actually Penelope who breaks the gaze, and in those seconds when he's looking at her, it just feels like he wants to say something or do something, and you feel like, damn it, Colin, damn it, what are you doing? And something else that I think is notable in that particular scene is that he calls Penelope by her name, whereas he calls Marina as Miss Thompson. And we are in episode 4, and he has not spoken to Miss Thompson since episode 1. Episode 5, Colin is talking to Marina. He's courting Marina, and he brings her flowers. I just wanted to point out that in that scene, Colin is holding yellow and orange flowers, which are the Featherington colors. And during that conversation, Penelope chimes in. She suggests that Colin go to Greece. Very clever. And Colin deflects, so there are no signs of affection from Colin here. Episode 6. Penelope talks to Colin about Marina, and she tells Colin that Marina loves someone else, but Colin is not perturbed by that fact by any means. He does thank Penelope for looking out for him. In episode 8, Colin is singing when Penelope enters the room, and as soon as he glances over, his voice softens, so it's clear that he's distracted when she enters the room. And it could be because the whole Marina situation blew up and it was Penelope who warned him about Marina, but I can't help but feel that perhaps there's something else going on in that scene. And in the final scene, we see Colin noticing Penelope at the Daphne and Simon ball. He can't help but come up to her, and he tells her that she inspired him to travel. And then he asks her to dance. He really didn't have to do any of these things. I think he really genuinely enjoys her company more than he knows. Maybe that's just me. And then, this is probably me reading too much into it, but before Colin mounts that horse to go off on his adventures, he glances at the Featherington house. And I can't help but feel that he is looking in that direction because he is perhaps leaving something behind, or perhaps he's looking at his inspiration in that scene. So there we have it, season 1. And between season 1 and season 2, Colin and Pen are exchanging letters. So apparently the whole time, they continued to write to each other. Season 2, episode 2. Colin comes back from Greece, and when he enters the room, he is looking at Penelope, and then he hugs Eloise, Benedict, and Violet, but then he comes back to looking at Penelope, and he just has this bewitched look on his face, and it feels like he wants to hug her. And also, they've already been writing to each other the whole time that he's been away, so he probably knows her even better now. They've probably gotten closer. She's the one who gave him the push to travel, but of course, that moment is interrupted by the family. In the next scene, Colin notices Penelope at the races, and she does this awkward thing where she stands nearby trying to get noticed, like, oh, I didn't see you there. But as soon as he sees her, I like how he smiles and he comes up to her. He says, hey, we didn't get a chance to speak. So it's clear that earlier he wanted to talk to her, but he couldn't because he was surrounded by his family. He then starts to say Pen, and then there's this moment of hesitation before he says, how have you been?
Pen, how have you been?
Well, I feel like in that moment, he just wants to say something and he's holding back. And then it's Eloise that interrupts the conversation. And then finally, in episode 2, they meet at Lady Danbury's. Penelope comes up to Colin. He already has a smile on his face as soon as he sees her. And this is where he completely destroys her. So he thanks her for giving him the motivation to travel. But the way that he's talking could honestly lead anyone on. He's talking about how he got to know someone on the trip, someone that he's known for a very long time. And it seems like he's going to say it's her, but then he just shoots her in the heart by saying he discovered himself, which is great. It's good for him. You know, he's definitely one of those kids that goes abroad for a semester and then comes back saying Barcelona. And then furthermore, he dumps another metaphorical bucket of cold water on her by saying that he has sworn off women, sure Colin, and that she doesn't count because she is his friend. Episode 4, Penelope comes up to Eloise and Colin is also in the scene. And this is not really a POLIN scene, but I just wanted to point it out because I love how excited Penelope is when she sees Eloise, more than Colin in that moment. I love how strongly they feel for each other, even though I know there's a serious backstab moment later in the season. And I recognize it. I understand it upsets a lot of people, but I do think that that friendship between the two of them is very real. Later in the episode, Colin goes to see Marina and Sir Philip Crane comes in. Colin makes a pun, which I feel is quite similar to the pun that Penelope made earlier. Colin says,
I certainly did. I oiled my way right in. That was an olive joke.
Or am I to accompany you to fetch some lemonade? You seem parched.
How can you tell? Is she wilting?
Or punch, if you prefer.
Plant pun, if you're wondering.
Later on, Marina talks to Colin, and Marina flat out says, hey, Penelope cares about you. And Colin seems to have nothing to say in response. Later, Colin and Penelope run into each other at the Featherington house, and Penelope reiterates the same lines as Marina. So Marina told Colin to leave the past behind, and Pen repeats, perhaps seeing her was what you needed to leave the past behind. Colin confirms this. He says, there's no need dwelling on the past. I am indeed thinking of the future. So perhaps some gears are turning. Episode 5. Colin comes up to Penelope and he wants to talk to her. He wants to talk to her about finding his purpose and about Cousin Jack. It's interesting that he takes interest in Cousin Jack's business. He can go for literally any other business. There are other men of business in this ton, but he seems to be going for Penelope's family. I wonder if that's subconscious on his part. Episode 6. At Anthony and Edwina's wedding, we see Colin talking to Pen and Eloise. And I like how Colin is smiling at Penelope as she's talking. He then makes fun of his sister and compliments Eloise, which is to be expected, brother-sister relationship. Later on, when they're outside, Penelope comes up to Colin, and this is where she gives him her purpose speech. Notice the way that he looks at her when she says this speech. He seems to be so in awe of what she's saying. He then says,
your dreams are grander than you let on, Pen.
Then he is slow in choosing his words. As he's responding, there looks like there's a hesitation in his voice before he says, Lady Crane was right about you. Episode 7. When the Bridgertons go on a promenade, they run into the Featheringtons, and Lady Featherington is talking to the Bridgerton family. Colin glances at Penelope. Why are you looking at her, Colin? It could be because Portia mentioned Marina, but maybe there's something more there. Later on in the episode, Penelope comes in as Colin is talking to Cousin Jack. Colin smiles as he sees her, and then he asks her to walk him out. He wants to keep talking to her. He mentions to her that because he's going to be entering into this business venture, both of their families are going to profit, which is what makes it so enticing. So it's clear that he wants her to be well off. He then mentions that their relationship has taken shape so naturally over the years, one could take it for granted. Then he stabs Penelope again, but he doesn't know it this time. He says that she has always been so constant and loyal. Meanwhile, Penelope has just dragged Eloise's reputation through the dirt. And then Portia comes in and he tells Portia that he was talking to Pen about foolish matters, that he would blush if he were to share them with anyone else, which goes to show that he feels really comfortable in sharing his ideas with Pen, even things that he can't share with others. Episode 8. Colin is dancing with Cressida and he throws a quick glance at Penelope. As soon as he's done dancing with Cressida, he grabs Pen's hand. He could have just said, come with me. I know that Colin has a hero complex, but there seems to be extra attention paid to Penelope. When there's a confrontation between Cousin Jack and Colin, he says, how dare you take advantage of these poor ladies? He genuinely cares and he addresses the matter in private for Penelope's sake. I know that Colin gets a lot of flack from fans, but the guy does have integrity. The first thing that Colin asks after the confrontation scene is if she's okay, and then he asks to dance with her. He really didn't have to dance with her. It's also very cute in that scene that as they're dancing, he confesses that he practiced that speech. He then says, I will always look after you, Penelope. You're special to me. And is it just me, or are the guys that are looking at Pen and Colin dancing, are they checking Penelope out? I think it could be read both ways, but maybe it's a setup for next season. I am, again, maybe reading too much into it. Later on, when Pen is looking for Eloise after they have a falling out, she overhears Colin say, "I would never dream of courting Penelope, not in your wildest fantasies, Fife." I think this line could be read in multiple ways. In one way, it could be Colin saying that he's not interested in Penelope. However, I think that line could be taken out of context. It's also possible that he has a special place for Penelope, that he can't conceive of courting her because she's so important to him. It's just very possible that when you deeply care for someone, you can't even imagine being with them. I know that taking all of these scenes together, other people would perhaps perceive Colin as completely oblivious, but all those pauses, all those moments where he hesitates, seem to suggest that he knows and that he might feel the same way. Those hesitations make me think that he has feelings that he's hiding from himself. And I have to point out that he's 21 years old. And at that age, for some people, you're in a place where you know how you feel, but you just don't feel comfortable saying it out loud. And you feel that social pressure to fit in. And you never really say what you really want to say, or you're in that weird awkward phase where you go for the person that you like less because it feels safe rather than the person that you like more because it would hurt so much more. So that is all that I have. I understand if people disagree. I know some people are not POLIN shippers, and I know some people don't like Colin, and some people don't like Penelope. I get it. I love Penelope. I can't help it. She's just a special gem in my heart, and Colin is not so bad. I like him. He's kind of cute, and I'm excited to see where this goes.